lying, cheating, secret handshakes, dark alley deal-making, secret Swiss bank accounts, money laundering, racketeering, and bribes for millions of dollars. No, we're not talking about the mafia, we're talking about sport, what's romantically called the beautiful game. Beauty, it seems, fell in love with the beast, as so often happens when lots of money is involved. Let's start at the beginning. It's called football. Some say it's soccer, and they credit Americans for that term, but the Brits invented the term soccer. It comes from the Football Association, which became known as Association Football. That was later shortened to ASOC or ASoccer, and that's how we got the word soccer. The Americans just called it what the Brits called it, but when people started using the term for football, the Americans had their own versions of football, and they didn't bother changing it from soccer. So arrogant Americans, as Europeans usually say, didn't actually invent the word, the English did. Over thousands of years, there have been games involving balls. The Mayans in Mexico had one, and at times that involved people dying. The Chinese had a game with a ball, as did the Greeks and the Romans, but the English invented the game as we know it today. They took a game that had earlier consisted of masses of players trying to kick a ball from one end of town to another, often with lots of fighting involved. Then later it became popular in British public schools. Two schools that played it were Rugby and Eton, where posh folks go and predictably end up ruling the country. At Rugby, as the name might suggest, the emphasis was on using the hands. At Eton, the emphasis was on using the feet. Rugby had the running game and Eton had the dribbling game. It was still a bit lawless, but over time more rules were created, and then in 1863 the Football Association was created in London and universal rules were applied to the game. It was similar to the game now, not including biased video-assistant referees and multi-millionaire men who can literally cry over nothing. Also, even though it was invented in those schools for the elites, it became a very working-class sport. In 1888, the Football League was introduced, which has now morphed into the English Premier League. Some of the first teams were Aston Villa, Blackburn Rovers, Everton, Notts County, Preston North End, and Wolverhampton Wanderers. Preston won the league for the first two sessions, something their fans never got to see again. Fast forward a few decades and most of Europe had its own leagues, as did countries in South America. European teams played against each other, with Spain's Real Madrid being the bee's knees in the 1950s. They're not too shabby nowadays either. In 1904, the International Federation of Association Football, or FIFA, was founded so European countries could play each other. By 1914, FIFA had added a few more nations, namely the US, South Africa, Argentina, Canada, and Chile. Football is now easily the most popular sport on the planet. You can go just about anywhere and see kids kicking a ball about while using their sweaters as goalposts. Whether in the desert, in mountain villages, or on the beaches of tiny islands in the Pacific, go to Timbuktu, Tajikistan, Tonga, Trinidad and Tobago, or Tibet, and you'll find folks screaming at the TV on weekends for their favorite team, often English teams, as the Premiership is very popular worldwide. No game in history has brought so many people together. John Lennon once annoyed a lot of American folks by saying the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Man, did that lead to an outcry. If he'd said football instead of the Beatles, those angry Bible belters would have had to admit he was right. Football is more popular than Jesus by a long way. It's easily more popular than any other sport. The English literary theorist Terry Eagleton once rightly said if religion was the opium of the people in the past, then football is the crack of the masses today. If people showed as much passion for solving social issues as they did football, we'd likely live in a better world. This makes football extremely valuable. And as you'll soon see, many people have dipped their dirty hands into the feeding trough of this beautiful game. It's thought that about 256 million people play the game seriously. FIFA says about 5 million referees are employed worldwide to watch over the games. Just about every country has school leagues, village leagues, town leagues, pub leagues, work leagues, and professional leagues. It's hard to find a country where it's not played from north to south, east to west. There are currently 211 national teams belonging to FIFA, so to get to the World Cup, they have to go through a qualifying period. In almost every World Cup, you get the usual suspects that qualify, but only Brazil has qualified for all 22 World Cups. Still, Germany, Argentina, Italy, Mexico, Spain, France, England, they're all usually there. It's always good when an outlier team qualifies, such as when Haiti did in 1974, Angola in 2006, Israel in 1970, Ukraine in 2006, Jamaica in 98, and this time, Qatar for the first time. Football brings us all together like no other sport, besides perhaps the Olympics. Qualifying means a lot to many nations. It's a matter of pride, and many people who don't normally watch football tune in every 4 years to see their national team play. It's not just a game, it's a culture, a conflict, and a form of national pride. It really has filled a hole that Jesus used to occupy. For sure, it's often tribal, and many bad things have happened off the field when the tribes, aka the hooligans, have fought running street battles with each other. This just shows you what it means to people. As a famous Liverpool manager once said, "Some people believe football is a matter of life and death." I'm very disappointed with that attitude. I can assure you, it is much, much more important than that. If you don't believe him, look at these stats. For the 2018 World Cup held in Russia, 3.572 billion people watched in total from the screens. The final alone was watched by a staggering 1.12 billion viewers worldwide. 32 teams qualified and over 191 million people watched each of the 64 games on average. In comparison, the 2021 Super Bowl was watched by 96.4 million viewers, quite a distance from 1.12 billion. When you have billions of eyes on screens, there's more going on than a sports game. As you'll know if you've ever watched the Super Bowl, advertising tends to get shoved down your throat. Everyone wants a piece of the money from major sporting events, which is why McDonald's currently has an ad campaign in 75 countries for this World Cup. What's more, brands want to sponsor the World Cup, knowing that many people will be watching it. A football is like a golden egg, and the goose that can help you lay it is FIFA. But let's just say all that cash floating around has led to some pretty dark practices. As the golden egg fable tells us, greed usually leads to crisis. Before we get to that crisis, you might want to know if the country that holds the World Cup gets any help. After all, stadiums need to be built, roads need to be fixed up or built, public transport systems have to be made, and security systems have to be created. The media is reporting that Qatar will spend $220 billion in all, although it's been spending since it was told it would host the competition in 2010. Still, with Qatar's entire GDP being around $180 billion in 2022, the World Cup has been one hell of an expense. It is truly a gamble of the century. There is a total of $440 million in prize money for this World Cup. $42 million goes to the winner, $9 million each goes to all the teams that don't even get past the group stage. Then you have the $247 million for the TV operations, $207 million for labor management, and many, many more millions related to operations. It's reported that operating costs in total should be about $1.7 billion. FIFA said it will foot the bill for this part. So, you have to ask how FIFA will get its hands on that much cash. A few decades ago, FIFA was just a bunch of gray-haired old geezers who ran the organization out of a small office. They probably struggled to pay the person who cleaned the windows. FIFA can pay all this cash partly from all the money it made from television. It gets tons of cash from ticket sales, hospitality, and all those lucrative corporate sponsorships. With all that in its mind, it's thought FIFA stands to make a total of $4.7 billion, which is quite a lot more than its output of $1.7 billion. Still, it has to put a ton of cash into the countries that belong to the organization for the development of football and in general just to ensure they can keep playing football following FIFA rules. We'll return to this later since FIFA has some rather embarrassing skeletons in its dusty old closet. It's reported that all those good-looking stadiums that Qatar has built and the ones that have been improved have set the country back about $10 billion. A further $36 billion has gone on to security, telecommunications, a metro system, hotels, a new airport, various kinds of hospitality, and more. Of course, all that stuff will still be there after the World Cup, so in a way, it's an investment in what will be important infrastructure. Still, not everything that glitters turns to gold. Brazil spent a whopping $1 billion on the Mané Garrincha Stadium in Brasilia, and it's now being used as a bus depot. Well, it was not long ago, we don't know if that's changed. But if the World Cup shows how great things look in your nation, all those hotels and all those new roads might be very profitable for many years to come. It's a gamble that most countries would likely take. Amnesty International says about 1.6 million migrant workers helped build this new part of Qatar, and it says many of them were underpaid, which has caused quite a stir as of late. Still, if you want to build that many things that fast, you need an army of workers and you need to spend big. The next countries that'll take this gamble are the US, Canada, and Mexico, who will host the 2026 World Cup. At least they can share the costs. And we doubt they'd do it if they thought they'd have a negative impact. Countries make a lot of money back over the period of the competition being played. Qatar estimates that 1.3 million people will travel to the country to watch the World Cup. Each person will spend varying amounts of cash, but as one website points out, even if they spend an average of $300 a day, Qatar will only net about $1.56 billion. Still, as we said, it might lead to the country becoming a major tourist destination in the years ahead. It can make use of all that extra development, and hosting the World Cup gives you a bit more respect on the world stage. Nonetheless, all the negative criticism that has come Qatar's way as of late could be said to be a bit of a setback for the country. If it had thought about that and treated its migrant workers better, there would have been far fewer problems. Alright, so now we'll talk about something we call the World Cup's dark economy. First of all, that mammoth amount Qatar has forked out in preparing for the World Cup is more than other nations in the past have paid by a long way. It's thought Russia spent about $11.8 billion to prepare things and then run the competition. It's hard to know just how much Russia made, but some reports state the competition added something like $14 billion to the economy. When it was held in the US in 1994, it's thought LA alone saw an economic profit of $623 million. Many cities raked in the bucks while many other folks were hired for the competition directly or indirectly. Moreover, it was a good old time for the US to show off its great hospitality and for soccer to see a rise in popularity, which was beneficial for developing the sport in the US. It's always a gamble, but a gamble that countries are willing to take. That's why they make bids to host it for future tournaments. And let's remember, while not everyone will benefit from having a bunch of beer-guzzling, rowdy Englishmen fighting and throwing up on your city's streets, those that push the bids will be doing so because they see millions of silver linings on potential dark clouds. But some of those people do business behind closed doors. They deal with the dark economy while talking about the cohesive spirit of the beautiful game. Let's just say many of them are more interested in fancy cars than they are in watching a phalanx of fit men chase after a leather orb for 90-plus minutes. Take, for instance, the former FIFA Secretary General Jérôme Valk. This nefarious Frenchman understood very well how much cash you can make from unofficial deals, which is why he was given a suspended prison sentence not long ago. It's a long and complicated story, and it's likely not even over yet. Let's just say he was accused of doing some shady World Cup broadcasting deals and was also accused of transferring a cool $10 million to someone belonging to the South African Football Association. This bribe money was to ensure South Africa hosted the World Cup, and lo and behold, it did. So, how was that for a deal you can't refuse? This was mafia-style business conducted by men who talk about the wonderful spirit of football and how it brings us all together. Al Capone would have been envious of such skullduggery. The money was supposed to go to developing sports in the Caribbean. Still, it seems nearly half of it went to a Trinidadian supermarket chain, and a good part went to corrupt officials' pockets. South Africa's sports minister Fikile Mbalula said, "We have not bribed anyone to host the 2010 World Cup. Payment for projects cannot be construed as a bribe. All we'll say is documents were forged, money went missing, bank accounts were stuffed, and kids in the Caribbean didn't see too many new soccer balls. The South African businessmen got what they wanted, as did all the others involved." In fact, a series of lengthy investigations have looked into dark money switching hands, either for World Cups being hosted in certain countries or for companies wanting certain contractual rights. Remember, this is an event of intergalactic proportions. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but trust us, it's worth a company's while to get the contract rights for the TV, transport rights, selling beers and hot dogs, and building bathrooms for hundreds of thousands of beer-blasted bladders. We're not saying the whole thing is corrupt, it's not by a long way, but it seems some people just couldn't resist getting in on the action. About 34 people so far have been indicted, but there will be more for sure. This isn't over yet, not by a long way. Take, for instance, Aaron Davidson, a former Miami soccer executive. He was arrested by the FBI in a FIFA corruption probe in 2015. The indictment read that he and a few others had corrupted the enterprise by engaging in various criminal activities, including fraud, bribery, and money laundering. 11 FIFA officials were charged with similar crimes from countries such as Argentina, Brazil, Trinidad and Tobago, and Costa Rica. Companies were also indicted, firms that not surprisingly moved about in the rarefied spaces of offshore tax havens. More arrests followed with various charges, but we'll just use the umbrella term corruption. Although on many indictments you could see the word racketeering, which reminds you of that old favorite organization we call the Italian-American Mafia. You can just imagine FIFA officials having sit-downs and telling each other to forget about it. We just hope that when the movie about the corruption scandal comes out, it starts with an official saying, "As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to work for FIFA." In 2015, two of FIFA's top dogs received an 8-year ban from all things football-related. They were Sepp Blatter and Michel Platini. Blatter had resigned anyway as FIFA head, but Platini had hopes of replacing him. They weren't done for corruption, but it seems FIFA had a lot of cleaning up to do, so heads had to roll. Bad things had happened on their watch, so they had to take some of the flack. It remains to be seen if Qatar bribed its way into hosting the World Cup. You have to wonder how a scorching country in the desert with no football history won, and countries with rich football histories did not. Qatar has been cleared regarding corruption, but there are those who believe FIFA officials were paid to vote for Qatar. Blatter has even said the vote was partly down to an arms deal between Qatar and France. Meanwhile, the man behind Qatar's World Cup has said things like this about the country's critics. European countries feel they have a monopoly over the World Cup. We can say that they are highly racist given that a country like Qatar, an Arab Islamic country, a small country, was able to compete with large countries that consider that they are more deserving of hosting this tournament. Still, football is like drug trafficking. The rewards are just too good not to take the risk of getting involved. Some people actually say that football is a drug, but the real opiate is the money. The game is the mere stimulant. Even so, we still can't wait to watch this World Cup. Now, you need to watch soccer player killed for scoring a goal, or have a look at what does the mafia even do anymore.